Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Science fiction, the great teacher, the great inspiration. It helps us see the endless possibilities of life. So let's be inspired together.
Come with me if you want to live.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We are not sending out interceptors. We have taken them completely by surprise.
Well, welcome to Trek or Critique. I'm your host, Commodore Jeff. Hope everybody's having a good week. It's really been nice the last couple of days here in Maine. Really decent temperatures and sunny. It's been really good here. And, you know, as we come closer to fall, we'll start to see some pretty colors out there out in the woods and stuff, from the leaves and things like that. And looking forward to that. But we still have the rest of summer in front of us here. So I wanted to show you a couple of things that I had made here. I made these things out of clay, which you can buy at Walmart. I made this out of clay. It's the Battlestar Galactica from Ron Moore's version of Galactica. Yeah, it looks a little bit like a Flintstone version of it. I'm not like what you would call that great with clay, but I took an attempt at making this thing just for the hell of it, and I painted it up to look, beat up and rugged, because it kind of looked that way in the show. And let me give you a front view of it here. See, and here's the back and bottom piece here. There was a lot of work to it. I mean, it's sculpey clay, which means you shape it and then you bake it for so many minutes, and then it hardens in the oven in the heat. Okay. Gosh, what are you doing here? And then I got this other one that I made. It's the Pegasus, and I tried to build this one to scale with the Galactica. Okay, this one was also in Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica. Okay, and like I said, not a professional clay builder or anything like that. Actually, I'm just beginning to make things out of clay mostly. And this took 3-4 days, I guess, to make. Let me show you these things in comparison here to scale. Here's the Galactica and here's the Pegasus. So it's bigger, They're pretty heavy too. But if I drop this on the kitchen floor, because it's linoleum floor, that would turn to powder. But I try, to be careful with them, because they can crack. But depending on how badly they break, you can repair it. But I try to be careful with it just the same. It's a hobby, something to do to pass the time, Maybe one day I'll try to do it again. Maybe I'll make them look better. Who knows? But for what I made, I mean, it's pretty good. Smokey, what are you doing? Hey! Hey, kitty! She gets so jealous when I'm on doing these recordings. She wants attention. So yeah, going back to what I was saying, yeah. So these are things that I like to do. I got a whole bunch of other things that I made out of clay. I got you know, starships from Star Trek that I made out of clay. I made some of, you know, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Remember the neighborhood of make believe? Remember when he had those models in his house on the shelves? Well, I tried making some of those models out of clay. And they come out really, really nice, I think. They really did. I mean, everybody I show them to, they says, "Oh my God, it looks like you bought them out of the store." You know, so, yeah, it's fun making this stuff. And you'd be surprised how creative one can get with these things. So, anyway, it kind of goes to what I wanted to talk about today on this video here about Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica. I mean, the series, it's been quite a few years since it came and went. But I feel that even after all this time, there's still a lot to, you know, that brings up conversation when people talk about it. And if you go to any Battlestar Galactica website, you're going to see there's still people, even to this day, still talking about it, commenting on it, because it had a lot of real-world issues that it was dealing with. Okay, mostly political kind of things going on, and and the thing is that, you know, as you watch the show, you get to see how politics in space would work. Okay, I mean, imagine Washington D.C. being this big giant spaceship in space, and they have to contend with the population that's in it. You know, when you're dealing with things like supplies, you know, a shortage of supplies, food, water, energy. You know, it takes a big fucking toll on a small, even a small society. So I guess, you know, I could say that in Battlestar Galactica, there's like 35 or 40,000 humans in space. You know, in this little fleet here of ships led by the Galactica. And from the very beginning, the issue of supply is the number one concern, because you gotta have water, food, and all that. And at the beginning, all they have is what they took with them, or what they have, you know. And so yeah, that would be a big thing, you know, to contend with. And it weighs heavily on the whole series, basically, as they try to find Earth, or a place that they can settle on that's far enough away from the Cylons and has everything they need to survive, you know. So it's a different, you know, different take from the original series that came out in the 70s, which I grew up watching. It was only on for one season, and then they canceled it, and then they came back with another called Galactica 1980, which was a different show, but it's based on Battlestar Galactica. But it only had like Lauren Green was the only carryover, I think, from the original show. All the other main characters were replaced. But that one lasted one season, and it got canceled, and that was it. So it was a series that didn't last long, but it made an impact, because it came out at a time when science fiction was really starting to explode, because that's right around Star Wars come out and everything, and so everybody was hungry for something science fiction-y. So Battlestar Galactica, unfortunately, did not last. But the quality of the series back then was epic, because they were using movie-style effects at the time. Okay, that's in the 70s now, which was really something to see for television, because that was like a step ahead of other shows like Star Trek, Lost in Space, you know, other science fiction shows that came before it. So this was like a brand new level here of science fiction on TV. Okay, but even with that and a compelling storyline, it just wasn't enough to keep it going, and I'll never understand why. I mean, I think there was a lot of, you know, studio shit that went on, you know, that probably killed it. You know, maybe the budget was too much, they couldn't sustain the show for another season. I don't know. I really don't know. It was bold in its implementation back in those days, because you won't see any other science fiction TV show like it around that time. And so it was a landmark in that, and it was on long enough to become a cult, you know, hit, where people just kept it going, you know, over the years, and came around comic books and stuff like that. Then they revived it, you know, with toys and stuff from Trendmaster, I think was the company that was making toys based on the comic books. And eventually they decided to reboot the whole thing, and that's when they came out with Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica. And Ron Moore, who had previously did some work on Star Trek, I think it was either Deep Space Nine or Voyager, decided he was going to produce this and give a more gritty take on the thing. He picked good actors. He picked a lot of good actors to play it. Okay, you know, you've got a lot of talent there. So I wasn't disappointed with who was chosen to play the roles. I think one of the things that was pseudo, people were having a hard time with, was one of the main characters having changing them from a male to a female, which was Starbuck, which Dirk Benedict had played in the original show, and then Katie Sackhoff was going to play in this newer version. Personally, I didn't care. I mean, I thought, you know, well, if this is going to be his baby, then he can do it any way he wants. But okay, and so I figured, well, I mean, at the time, Katie Sackhoff was really, you know, relatively unknown. Okay, I think she had just come off of the Bionic Woman, the remake Bionic Woman, which didn't last very long. And then she got on this role here, but she wasn't really that well known. But this show made her a star, basically. She performed well in the role of Starbuck in that, and that's what got her notoriety enough to get into other things, and eventually Star Wars, where she's doing stuff as a Mandalorian, you know, in that show. But that was controversial at the time. But after they seen her, you know, I think people just shut up after that, because they figured, oh, you know, it ain't so bad after all. Okay, it added a new layer to this friendship that she had, you know, with Apollo and Starbuck. It was a friendship that existed in the original series, two pilots, you know, two guys. And in this one, it had a little more of a romantic take on it, because now it's Apollo as a guy and Starbuck's a woman, and so you have that going on in there. So they changed the dynamic of the relationship essentially with that, and I think that was deliberate, because, you know, they wanted to have something there, because there were other female main characters, but they weren't the focus. You see. They weren't the focus, and I think they thought that, or at least Ron Moore thought, it would make it more interesting to have this kind of dynamic between the Commander Adama, his son Apollo, and you know, Starbuck, sort of like a trio, if you know. And it was nice. They don't have a Daggett, at least not the robot one. That you see in the original, which I missed. You know, it was kind of cute to have this robot dog which, you know, was back then they had a monkey dressed up in this costume as a robot dog playing Daggett. Which today I don't know if they'd ever do that because it might be considered harmful to the animal, you know, so they probably wouldn't do that today. But back then they did this, and you know, it worked out well because, you know, it just added a realism to it that you wouldn't have got otherwise if they'd have just did something like an R2-D2 or something like that, you know. But this one had more natural movements and stuff, so it made it more realistic, you know. But unfortunately they didn't carry that over into the new version. The other thing they didn't carry over from the original was the fact that there are other aliens out there. We don't see any other aliens in Ron Moore's version. All you have is the humans and the Cylons. There's no other aliens. You don't run across anything else out there that's, you know, like they were showing in the original, which I thought was kind of sad that, you know, everything about the show was just focused on these two societies. They're the Cylon society and the human society, or what's left of it. But there's no other life in space, okay? I guess because Ron decided he wanted to focus a lot on the connection between the Cylons and the humans through this religious arc that figures prominently in Ron Moore's version of Battlestar Galactica. There's a little bit of that in the original, but they don't stress it so much. Okay, in this one, it's very thick. Okay, it's very thick in that religious area. They kind of go off the rails a little bit with it because I don't think it really, when they finished the series, I don't think the show really answered all the questions I think that had come up during the series. Because, you know, what they were saying was everything was going to end up like this. Through the whole series, they, you know, the dialogue was that everything will end up, we're finding Earth, okay? And this will happen, and this will happen, and this will happen, okay? And when all those things happened, we still don't know anymore about their religion or how that ever, you know, what's responsible. We never learned anything further than that, except that there's these two mysterious angels that keep popping up in certain people's vision along the way, and that never gets answered as to who and what they are, okay? So the religious part of it was not handled, I think, in a very good way, but religion and science fiction is never really handled that well anyway. I mean, Deep Space Nine had that fucking problem, Star Trek, okay, with the Bajoran religion, okay? There was a lot there that just didn't make any sense about it. And they try to excuse it by saying, well, religions are just faith-based and they don't have to make sense, you know, just to basically say, well, it's like the, you know, if it doesn't make any sense, then Q did it or something, you know, you know what I'm saying? It's too easy to just expel that by saying, oh, it's a religion, you don't have to know everything. Okay, but when you're doing a story, it's important to have some sort of, you know, continuity, some kind of connection that people can follow, so that way the end result of the story makes sense. If you're trying to say something in the story, you don't want it to be vague, you want it to be clear, you know? And since Battlestar Galactica, Ron Moore's version, was only going to last so many seasons, he said it right at the beginning, it was only going to be 4 or 5 seasons long, and that's it. He already had the whole story mapped out in his head, apparently, before he started it, how this was going to shake down. So, that being said, it would have been nice if that religious aspect of the show was a little more clear, because it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And even on the show, the characters were written in such a way where they didn't see any sense in any of it. Okay, and so there was, and when you had that going on along with the political crap that was happening, dividing the human, what's left of humanity, into factions and stuff, I mean, it was a big sea of things, okay, going on all at once. So the stories were very heavy, you know, in both those things, politics and religion, during Battlestar Galactica. And I think that, you know, in order to make this more gritty the way Ron Moore wanted it, to make it seem more realistic the way he wanted it, I guess, you know, the political shit that was going on during the series would probably be something that would happen, okay? The fact that people would be like stuck in these ships for months and years at a time, you know, people are going to get pissed. They're going to want to get the hell off this ship, you know, or something. They're going to want to go, they want a home. They want to stop living like refugees. Okay, so yeah, that would be realistic. Okay, the religious thing, I don't think that should have been so heavily focused, except the fact that they brought the Cylons got involved in it, because this religion also included them. Okay, which means there was some kind of connection between humanity and the Cylons, but it never really got fleshed out enough to understand. So I think that was, you know, one of the parts of Ron Moore's Galactica that I didn't really like was that they doubled down on the religion aspect of the show, where in Deep Space Nine, I mean, it wasn't the entire focus of the show, but it just, even there, it didn't kind of have any sense, or any, you know, if you took that whole element out, it wouldn't have made any difference to the show, you know, so there was no point in putting that in there, as far as I'm concerned, I guess. But they really focused a lot of that on Deep Space Nine, and so when Ron Moore did this on Battlestar, it was even more so. So it was like, so that part of it I didn't like. Okay, I thought it was too much of that in there. And like I said, during the run of the whole series, you know, everything was already being predicted to happen in a way that it did, so a lot of things didn't come to much surprise, except I think in season 3 or 4 they find a planet they thought was Earth, but it turned out that it wasn't Earth. It was just a world that was once populated by humans, or by Cylons rather, and they had their own version of Cylons there, but they had a nuclear war, I guess, and everything alive on that planet is now dead. You know, somehow, you know, the path they followed led them to that world instead of the Earth that, you know, we're on today, because they linked this Galactica to today, to Earth today. But they actually reach Earth, us, here on our world, like 50, 60,000 years ago. So we find out at the end of the series that this whole story takes place in the distant past. Okay? And all this went on. So we are all descendants of the Galactica crew, or in the fleet, basically. And I guess there was a message to be sent there, because at the end, Ron Moore shows us clips of humanity tampering with technology and creating robots that could evolve into Cylons, and, you know, start the whole cycle all over again, because one of the themes of the show was it's happened before, it will happen again. Sort of like this is a repeated scenario. Humans create robots, the robots wipe the humans out, and they do it all over again and again and again, okay? Which doesn't really make much sense there either, except to say that everything that's happened will happen again. Like, you know, there's sort of this kind of rut humanity is in that it can't get itself out of, and it keeps us, you know, always refugees all the time. So it's like, you know, someday down the road, Earth is going to end up with Cylons and create new Cylons, and those Cylons are going to want to be sentient, and they're going to want to have their own. You know what I'm saying? Sort of like the Terminator. Kind of like that. It's like a setup for the Terminator. That's the way I looked at the ending, you know, walking away from it. It's like, oh, okay. So then, in other words, when we start building Terminators, that's really the Cylons, and they're gonna. All right. So you could actually dovetail that into the Terminator franchise, you know. So it wasn't. I mean, I was like, you know, here we go again, beating up technology, you know. It's like it's an old concern, okay, of years past, where during the 80s everybody was always worried that, oh, we're going to invent things and technology is going to get out of hand and it's going to do us in. That's been a fear that was covered, talked about, debated, you know, for decades. And so Ron Moore, you know, taking that dive into that at the end was sort of cliche, you know. It's like, what? Come on, you know. It's like, you mean to tell me this entire series was based on the fact that, oh, technology could get out of hand and we're going to end up wiping ourselves out? I mean, it's like the same old fucking shit you hear in every fucking movie made about technology versus man. You know, I don't buy it. I don't think we're ever going to have a problem like that. Okay, I just don't believe it. Personally, I think, you know, people are smart enough to put an off switch on something if it gets out of hand. But I just felt like we were kind of cheated out of a bigger ending, you know. And I think a lot of people who watched Battlestar Galactica, Ron Moore's version, will tell you the same thing. They kind of felt cheated at the end, like, you know, we missed something that should have been big and epic for an ending, and we didn't get it, you know, because there was so much emphasis on the build-up to it that what we got in the end felt like it was rushed, you know, and thrown together. Like maybe they didn't, the original ending wasn't good enough and they had to redo it because it wasn't clear. I don't know. It felt like it was hurried. It felt like it was hurried towards the end, the last episode. Okay. And then certainly the way Starbuck was handled in their mid-show, where she died and then came back as something. Okay, and nobody ever wonders who or what this is. It looks like Starbuck, it talks like Starbuck, but it's not Starbuck, because we find Starbuck's body on that world I told you about, the one that was that had gone through a nuclear war. Her ship crashed there, so they find her body there, a skeleton with her dog tags that says Starbuck on it, and the other Starbuck finds that, and she's like, well, if this is really Starbuck, then what am I? Okay, and so we never know. They never answer that question. What the hell is she? So it's so we spend the next 2 seasons with this clone Starbuck, I guess. I don't know. And then at the very last episode, she just kind of up and vanishes, and it's like she never existed. Everybody's like, you know, she's gone. She just left, you know. And I think a lot of people didn't like that. They didn't like that ending at all, and I don't blame them, because it's like, you know, look, you took what became one of the more popular characters on the show and you gave her a shitty ending. Okay? It didn't make any sense. It didn't need to be that way in the show. It didn't have to end that way with this character. They could have had this character go all the way from start to finish as she was, okay, and not having this mysterious thing happen to her. It didn't play anything into the show, okay. The only thing is they kept saying that she was going to bring about humanity's end, but that's not what happened. Okay, what that meant was that she was going to guide humanity to the end of the trek to find Earth. Okay, but the way they went about doing it was so convoluted, it distracted us from the whole point of what the hell the people were predicting that she was going to do for humanity at the end. Was she's actually going to find Earth. Okay, that she's going to lead humanity to Earth. Okay, so like I said, they didn't have to kill her off or bring her back. That they could have just left it, you know, where she would have found something, you know, because she seemed like a person, you know, her character was played as a person who feels like her only purpose is just to fight, but she wants something more out of life. She wants to be something more important than that, you know, because it's just empty, you know. It just to go out, kill, come back, go out, kill, come back, you know. She wanted more, so I think it would have been better if they'd had something related to what, you know, her trying to understand a prediction to try to figure out what it means, you know, and then through fate she actually, you know, in her way finds Earth by accident or something like that. But to have her killed off and come back as a spirit, and having her know, oh, I know exactly where Earth is, and just follow me. Okay, that was like, okay, forget it. That's just too much. Okay, you're making it more unrealistic. I mean, you want us to connect to these characters, okay, as people, because that's really what this show is about. It's about people like us trying to survive an apocalypse, okay? And you want us to keep grounded with those characters. If you want us to actually feel any empathy for them or understand anything about what they're doing, you want us to be able to relate to them. But we can't relate to spirits or ghosts or robots or something like that. You know what I'm saying? We can't relate to those things because we have to depend heavily on the writer, the author, the actor to give us what it must be like. But we can't make that reach. We can't make that connection based on, you know, how they're doing it or what they are. But in this case, they separated us from Starbuck by killing her off and bringing her back. Now we don't know what she is. She's not even a human being, for that matter. She's just something, okay? And the way she ended, the way they just, you know, erased her and like, you know, like she wasn't there. She's just a figment of everybody's imagination or something like that. It just seemed like it was a bad way to end a good character, you know. But like I said, if it wasn't for the fact that they had good actors in that show, I don't think it would have worked as well as it did. I really think that it was the actors that carried that show and their performances to make those stories better than they were written, okay? And that right there is, I think the casting was spectacular for that show. And I think it's what keeps that show relevant even today, after all this time, is that, you know, it's a good go back to and watch some excellent performances by, you know, a lot of veteran actors. Without them, it wouldn't have worked. I don't think it would have worked. I really don't think it would have worked. And another thing about the show, if you're a Star Trek fan, you're going to see all kinds of, what do they call them, Easter eggs? Of Star Trek in the series, okay? Because Ron Moore, like I said, worked on Star Trek before he got on that. And for some reason, you know, he decided to put things in there that, you know, it's like, oh, that was on Star Trek, you know, or something like that. Even had a few actors from Star Trek in there. Like Nana Visitor, she guest starred in that, and they had some things written on bulkheads like 1701D on a door. You know, there was all kinds of little things, you know, trying to connect it, or Easter eggs of Star Trek in there, which was okay because it seemed to, you know, it wasn't like something that was like, oh, come on, you know. So you know, it was kind of cutesy, I guess, in a way that they put that stuff in the Galactica and everything. Oh yeah, and they actually had the actress who played Ensign Rowe. She was the commander of the Pegasus, and she did an outstanding job in that role. I tell you, I don't think they give her a whole lot of credit for that. She really did. That was one of her best performances, I think, in the many things that I've seen her act in over her career. She really did a good job with that. So yeah, it's really quite a. I think, in fact, they liked it so much they actually did a spin-off movie based on just the Pegasus, what happened to the Pegasus, which, you know, it's part of, it's not in the actual series, it's a spin-off movie they made based on that character. And that's a good little movie that you should see on there. Actually, they did two spin-off movies. They did one called Blood and Fire, I think it was, where it's based on Adama as a young man in fighting in the first Cylon War. And, you know, it was a pretty good, it would be a good lead up to the series to watch first. And so they did the series Battlestar Galactica, and then they ended it, and then a year after that, they came out with Caprica, the TV. It was based on Battlestar Galactica. It's one of the homeworlds of the human race, Caprica, where Adama is a little boy, and he's living with his father because his father is a lawyer, I guess. And we see how the Cylons kind of get started, you know, and all that. And I don't think it was really that interesting because a lot of people just tuned out from that. It had, the concept of it was interesting, but the execution of it was terrible. Okay, I don't know. It was like they were trying to say too many things in the show about the fall of humanity and the rise of the robots and shit like that. And it's like, really, I mean, it's kind of the same story that Galactica was going through without having to see the, you know, the lead up to it. I mean, we already know what happened to humanity and why they're all on this spaceship heading towards Earth, the mythical Earth. We already know that. There was no point in rehashing that. Okay, they kind of talked a little bit about the before time during the series a little bit, but there was no need to go back to it in that fashion and just do a whole series on it, because there was really nowhere to go with it that we haven't already known. You know, it's sort of like the prequels movies to Star Wars. It's like, well, where's the surprise? We already know Anakin's going to turn into Darth Vader. You know, we already know that Palpatine is going to end up becoming the Emperor. We already know how things are going to shake down at the end. So it was like there was really no pressing need to see the prequels, because we already kind of put the story together in our minds just watching episodes 4, 5, and 6. You know, from Star Wars New Hope to the Return of the Jedi. We learned the backstory in a way through those movies. So there was no point really to go back and do prequels. Just, you know, I think the only reason was just to see how it all politically ended up this way. But, you know, when you tell a story like that, I mean, that's going to leave the audience snoring, because politics is boring. You know, if 3 movies are going to deal with how a man overthrows a whole fucking government, you know, I mean, it's like, okay, you know, I'm sorry, okay. And I think that's what made the prequels, you know, with mixed reviews for the most part, is that it just, we all knew how it was going to end. You know, it was no surprise about any of it. Of course, you talk to the younger generation that saw it for the first time, and they'll think otherwise, because they didn't start watching it the way I did with episode 4, A New Hope. They started watching it from episode 1, Phantom Menace, and they got to see everything progress as it should have been written in the first place. So their perception of those 3 movies is going to be different than mine, because since I went into that knowing already how it was going to end, these kids didn't. Okay? They started watching it, and then they watched the rest, okay? So, that's one of the things about Lucas that I wish he didn't do, is if you're going to start a story, start at the beginning. Don't just throw us in the mid-book, okay? You know, next time you want to do something like that, make sure you start it at the beginning if the story demands it, because it's really important. Okay, and if it's not that important, then don't even rehash. Don't even go back and say, let's do a beginning. No, you already did that, okay? 4, 5, and 6, that should have been it. The end. The story was already told in those 3 movies, all of it, okay? Really, there was no need for a prequel. There was no need for a sequel. I think a lot of Star Wars fans my age would agree with that the story was told in those 3 films. But, like I said, it was just, I think, a cash grab is what it was. They was trying to, Star Wars was becoming big again, and they figured, let's market some more on it, and, you know. But Battlestar Galactica, like I said, it's, when they did Caprica, I felt like that was the same thing. We didn't really need to see that, okay? It was an interesting effort. I think it could have been just a TV movie or something like that, just, you know, like a 2-hour movie. Probably would have been better than to do a whole series, because, you know, when you're trying to pick up a simple thread to connect to a bigger series, it gets boring really fast, and I think that's what happened. Is that people were just they didn't like the main characters that much. I don't think the story was slow, plodding, and it just didn't have what it needed to stay. I mean, it just like people today don't even really talk about Caprica anymore. Okay. But like I said, overall, when I was Battlestar Galactica, I still like the original better because at least the original had more scope. Okay, it didn't just focus on humans and the Cylons. They got to encounter a lot of things along the way, like in Star Trek, they meet new aliens and stuff, So I mean, it was like that. You got to see other worlds on the original Battlestar Galactica, and it had more of the traditional kind of adventure stories that I like, and yet it still had some elements of what humanity would be going through in that situation, which kept it grounded there in that regard. And certainly Richard Hatch, Dirk Benedict, Lauren Green, these and Jane Seymour, at least in the beginning. I mean, they hey, Christ, you can't beat that. Again, they had good actors in that show back then too, just like they did in the newer version of it. Now, I heard they're thinking about doing another movie, Battlestar Galactica movie, like one for the theaters. I don't know. I haven't heard anything more about that. I heard this about maybe a year ago, that they were thinking about rebooting this thing yet again, and I don't know what more they could tell with this story. I really don't. But they're going to try and bring a new perspective to it. I'm not really sure what that's going to mean, but I would think by now they would have done it, but I think they're just waiting until fan build-up to have it come out begins, I guess. I don't know. Timing is everything with movies and stuff. They didn't come to this Ron Moore's version of Battlestar Galactica quickly. It took years for them to decide to do it again. So it could be years more before they decide to do a movie reboot of this concept story. So I don't know really, but if you do like Battlestar Galactica, the original Battlestar Galactica, you're probably still going to like it. Even after you watch Ron Moore's version. I think Ron Moore's version should be taken as its own thing, and it has nothing to do with the original. So even though Richard Hatch is in this new one too, he plays a whole different character. He's not Apollo in this movie. He's actually a terrorist in this one. So it'd be interesting to see him play that, but it has no connection at all to the original. Consider it an alternate reality. Okay, if you want to look at it that way, this is this alternate reality of Battlestar from the 70s. And I wouldn't recommend young people watching it, because they will fall asleep through a lot of it, because it's just political, and there's religious overtones, and nothing a person my age at the time when I watched the original would be interested in watching in that. So it's made mostly for adults, for whatever that's worth. So I'm not trying to bitch about it. It's for adults. It would be a good TV show to watch, because it doesn't make you feel like you're an idiot. Okay, they give you what humanity is like. They're the meat and potatoes of the human race, basically. And so you're going to see lots of stuff in there that we see today, in parts of our world today. It's really on display in this small fleet of ships of 40,000 people. So anyway, yeah, I wanted to do this review about the Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica. And if you get a chance, if you can stream it, or if you can, I don't know, watch it in some way, at least watch the premiere movie episode, okay? Because when the show started, it started as a little TV movie, okay, and then it went into series after that, okay. So the first episode of the Ron Moore series is actually there is like the aftermath of what happened when they left Caprica behind and all that, okay, because that's essentially how it begins in that TV movie, Battlestar Galactica. The series picks up after the TV movie, and that's the show you're watching from there, okay. So if you watch it, keep in mind that the first episode is the afterwards, after the exodus from Caprica. That's when the show starts. So you have to watch the 2-hour TV movie that came out before that, so yeah. Anyway, that's it. So I hope everybody has a great weekend. So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye bye.